welcome to Bookstock Literary Festival 2020, the inaugural kickoff event with Reuben Jackson. Welcome, Reuben. We're so happy to have you here this evening. I'm Jenna Blum. I am the co-founder and the CEO of A Mighty Blaze, which specializes in helping writers and industry people and festivals go online in this new digital age. So I have the great privilege of chatting with Reuben tonight and talking with the founders of the Bookstock Festival and sort of touring as much as we can from our homes of Woodstock, Vermont, including the beautiful library that they have there, which we're going to talk about in a minute, the Norman Williams beautiful library. And getting Reuben to read us some poems and talk a little about that and about jazz. So make yourselves comfortable. I feel as though when I was listening to Miles, I like misplanned my drink. I'm having a gin and tonic, but I should have had some wine and some really good cheese. You know, next time I'll know better, but I hope all of you at home are enjoying your cocktail or your tea or your popcorn and getting ready to have a soothing and inspiring and enlightening evening. And that's all on you, Reuben. So you get to do that. First, I have
no pressure. Okay.
No pressure, right? I would tell you that in the script that you were supposed to be soothing, inspiring, and enlightening. So work on that a little bit.
That's what people call my people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I know. We'll slip you some index cards through the chat. So right now, I'm going to introduce Meg Brazil, who is going to introduce the festival. And Meg, she has the greatest bio. Normally, I don't do a very long introduction of an introducer, but like Meg is that chick. Like she is that cool. So I'm going to put on my glasses to make sure I don't miss anything.
Oh, no.
Yes, they come in. These are the glasses I got when I thought they looked cute long before I actually needed them to read, which I do now. So, but now I have like the great aid in reading your bio, Meg. So Meg Brazil is a writer, editor, and recovering punk rocker, although apparently one never really recovers from this. Once you've got the rock in you, it's just there, right? He created and produced the largest literary reading series in Los Angeles called Readings and Conversations, which is still ongoing in Santa Fe. And she brought to that reading Maurice Sendak, Susan Sontag, so like some small names, Christopher Hitchens, many other authors. So she's familiar with dealing with authors and all of our craziness. In New York, Meg worked in artist management for the composer Philip Glass and his ensemble. And Meg's own band, Los Microwaves, found its groove in the late 70s and early 80s in the punk rock scene in New York and San Francisco. She's way cooler than I will ever be. In fact, both of the people who you're going to see tonight are cooler than I'll ever be. The Microwaves' Life After Breakfast album was reissued recently, and there was a reunion tour, which is fascinating. And Meg was the lead singer and the bass player, occasional keyboardist, and lyric strategist. I did not know that was actually a thing. Currently, she's the director of communications and events at the Norman Williams Library. We are seeing her this evening from Woodstock, Vermont. That is not a virtual screen, you guys. That is the actual beautiful Norman Williams Library. Right. And Meg is in the reading room. So if you would, Meg, I wanted to highlight the musicality in your background, because I think tonight we have such a beautiful crossing of streams between language and music, with you hosting this event, and obviously with Reuben, who is a poet and a jazz journalist and archivist and music nerd, which covers the whole thing. And don't worry, I'm going to embarrass you shortly by reading your
emeritus, music nerd emeritus.
Or just jazz emeritus. Look at you. So I feel as though you guys are very much of a feather in having this sort of braided love of literature and of music. And Meg, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about the festival and how you approached Reuben for this, and about the library, we would love to hear.
Woodstock, Vermont. We're a town of about 3,000 people. And so when we hold the Bookstock Literary Festival here, it brings about 1,000 people to town. So it's like another 30% of our population is in the village. And the library is often pretty integral to that. Bookstock started about, 12 years ago. And I think from the second year on, the library's always been really involved. And it grew from just, you know, a handful of authors to about 45 authors in 2019. And we just put our authors in every nook and cranny where we could. And our library had no air conditioning last summer, and people were just like here sweating, but it didn't matter because everybody was just riveted by listening to all these wonderful people talking about their books. And so as you know, it's a different time this year, and so we're one of about 50% of the libraries who've reopened partially in Vermont, but we're just starting our virtual events. And so tonight is actually the very first event of any sort that we're doing online. Well, I guess, you know, we have we do some poetry things with one another that online, but this is our first public one. And so at any rate, it's also the first kickoff of our virtual Bookstock 2020. And we're just really, really glad that we can present a few of the authors that we had planned to present this year. And we're going to, we have 4 scheduled, and we hope to do more, but for now we couldn't be happier to be starting off with Reuben Jackson. So before we get any further, I just want to mention that want to thank our sponsors who have been so important to helping us get this started. So our major sponsor is Mascoma Savings Bank, and we're also supported by the Dorothy Byrne Foundation and the Pauline Davenport Children's Fund, which is part of the Vermont Community Foundation. And so Jen is going to give you more of an introduction to Reuben, but before we go to that, I will just say that Bookstock will be back live in 2021, we certainly hope. And Woodstock is kind of back in business, so there are people coming to our occasional book sale and things like that. So if you happen to be driving to Killington to ski or something like that, stop on by and do say hi. Our library was built in 1883, and as we like to say, we were here before the internet, and we were definitely here during the last pandemic, and so I think we'll get through this one. So I want to tell you a little bit about Reuben from a different way than Jenna will give him the proper and formal due that he deserves. But I want to say that he lived in Vermont for at least 5 years, but I kind of know of him from his time on Vermont Public Radio when he hosted Friday Night Jazz. And, you know, the stories around him, you kind of never know. Was he here 5 years or was it 7? Was he here at 5?
Is he still here? Yeah.
Or 3. I saw him yesterday. Wasn't that, you know, it's kind of, you know, he's just kind of like that. So he's hard to pin down. But anyway, I first heard him when he was the host of Friday Night Jazz, and I got so hooked. I mean, there's not a lot of things going on in the 802, but which is Vermont. But so when there's something good, you gotta go with it. And so, like, over time, Friday night, I was just kind of turning down invites left and right because I wanted to go home and listen to Reuben on the radio. And there are so many people who, you know, who say this, but over time, like, my family and friends got suspicious as to who I was spending my Friday nights with, you know. Finally, I had to confess. It's like, it's Reuben. It's Reuben. But, you know, I'm just home with the radio. So it was kind of embarrassing, but also wonderful. And I you know, I still think of those times. And one way of sort of thinking about how small our state is that today, a friend who was getting out of the hospital, I was just checking in with him. He said, oh, I'm not gonna be able to make it because I'm just, you know, I'm just getting out of surgery. But tell Reuben that I was at the Phoebe Snow and Jackson Browne concert in 1975. And I was like, what? And apparently Reuben mentioned it on the radio.
I was there. Yeah, I was there.
So anyway, he's giving a shout out to you.
Oh, gosh. Wow.
And it's just a very small place. And you know, when Reuben left the area and moved back to DC, it was like when the Dodgers left Brooklyn. I mean, it tore the heart out of this place. I'm telling you.
I cry easily.
So anyway, with that,
I'm
we're so glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jenna?
You know, it's going to be really hard for me to follow that, Meg. So thanks a lot, because I did not have the privilege of spending my Friday nights with Reuben yet. But I know from the response when I was posting online on the Blaze and on Bookstock that we were going to have Reuben on. Like, people were like, "Oh my gosh, he's so beloved. We loved his jazz show on Vermont Public Radio and the Young Writers Project in Vermont." I know also Reuben is very instrumental and a mentor in that project. And I was walking my puppy yesterday, and I got a call from Stephen Kiernan, who's a novelist in the 802. So I know, you know, what that area code signifies. And he said, make sure that, you know, you say hello from me. Like, we know Reuben, he's like a very admired and dear person here, even though he absconded to the evil inside the Beltway. But I think, I mean, the 802 is great, right? And I'm wondering if Reuben misses that. We had like Stephen there, we have Chris Bajalian, there's a lot of art, there's a lot of music, and we have Bookstock. And one of our attendees mentioned that Bookstock offers everything for free, you guys. So we're really grateful to the sponsors. We're really grateful to everybody who came to what I hear is the world's best used book sale in previous years as well, like this cornucopia of used books. And all of you who are here tonight, all of you who are faithful attendees of this festival now in its 12th year, thank you so much for supporting it and helping give the 802 such a robust artistic presence. And Reuben, your presence is still felt there and will always be felt there, even if you're in Washington or we're all sitting, I mean, we could all be sitting in like Denmark right now and nobody would know, right? So I'm really grateful you're here. Okay, so I'm going to get your official bio out of the way so that we can actually talk like fun, like human beings, and hear your poetry, and I can ask you all the notes.
I'm going to cry while you're doing it.
Okay, good. You do that. I love to make people cry. Like, that's my favorite. I mean, really, like as a writer, I love to make people cry.
You
but
got the right guy tonight, then. Yeah.
All right, you know. Life gets better and better. If I had known I could have made you cry like every Friday night as a call-in, I totally would have done that. I would have been like, "Oh my God, Miles Davis again. I love you so much, Reuben." And you would.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah.
Okay, so buckle up. Here comes your bio. Get the hanky out. You ready? He's good. I think. Right, you're good.
I'm okay. Yeah.
Okay, I love this. Okay.
My friends are listening. They know Reuben.
You know when the weeping is coming?
Oh,
Somebody
yeah.
cue me in the Q&A. Oh, and by the way,
Sunday through Sunday, it could happen. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And also maybe like 25/7, it could happen. Any moment during that limited time window. So I want to ask also that all of you who are watching tonight, whether you're watching in the webinar or you're watching on the Blaze Facebook page, please send us your questions, especially if you think you can make Reuben cry with joy. Send us your questions. Our team on Blaze on Facebook will pass them to me, and if you put them into the Q&A on our webinar, I will make sure to ask Reuben all the things. So please do send those to me. Cogitate upon them while I read Reuben's bio. You ready, Reuben? The glasses are coming on. You ready? Okay. Reuben Jackson is a poet, radio commentator, educator, and music critic. Are you crying yet? Not crying. He served as the curator of the Smithsonian Institute's Duke Ellington collection in Washington, D.C. for over 20 years, from 1989 to 2009, which is so fantastic, and was the beloved host of Friday Night Jazz on Vermont Public Radio, where Meg was hanging out every Friday night from 2013 to 2018. Reuben's radio essays have aired on National Public Radio, which we also know as NPR, and WAMU FM. Your music reviews have been published in The Washington Post, Washington City Paper, Jazz Times, and on NPR's All Things Considered. Reuben has also been an educator and mentor, as I mentioned, with the Young Writers Project in Vermont. He taught poetry for 11 years at the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and taught high school for 2 years in Burlington, Vermont, and is a founding member of the New Music Theater Workshop. You currently work there as a librettist, I am told. Is that true? It's true. Okay, good. My facts are good. And you are an archivist with the District of Columbia, Felix E. Grant Jazz Archives. Your poems, this will amaze the writers in the audience, especially the poets, because it's a tough gig. Your poems have been published in over 40 anthologies. Let that sink in, folks. 40, not 14, 40 anthologies. Oh, that's great. And your first volume, Fingering the Keys from 1990, Gut Punch Press, was selected by Joseph Brodsky for the Columbia Book Award, which must have been a thing. Your new book, Scattered Clouds, was published by Alan Squire Publishing. So welcome, Reuben. We are so happy to have you here this evening. Your illustrious self, your big-hearted self, your crying a little bit self. Please unmute yourself so that we can have a chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to cry. And I would at least cry in like the key of B flat or something. But thank you all so much for re-inviting me. You know, when the world fell on its butt earlier this year, I was crestfallen because, and this isn't therapy, so I won't get all Dr. Phil on people here, but you know, I'm forever grateful for the love which people still send me by way of emails about the show. And someone said the other day, you know, it's like your show was a weekly love letter to music, which, you know, I was a kid who sat in the back of the class and was trying to write poems even in grade school and dreaming about music and thinking about like major seventh chords and stuff. So anyway, to have done something, to have had the snow stick, I'll use a soon to come, you know, Vermont metaphor, is not a small thing. So I'm glad to be here and to be with some of my homies, you know, geography and the challenges of these days notwithstanding.
We're so happy to have you here. We were talking in the green room a little bit before we jumped on about COVID weariness. And that's not, you know, we're all here tonight to sort of get away from it. But at the same time, I feel like tipping your hat to it and saying like, what unprecedented times for this generation and the previous generation. So how has it been for you to sort of pivot to come online? How have you adjusted as an artist, as a poet, as a musician?
As a semi-Luddite, I'm fairly proud of myself because I've done a couple of other readings and, you know, taken part in some classes and stuff. And I've gotten better and more comfortable each time. So I'm glad about that. And I'm trying to look at it like, what's that old song? Accentuate the positive. Because first couple of times I did it, I wanted to weep because like you see people you know, fellow writers or what have you, and you can't hang out with them or hug them. And that's still tough for me, but it's less so because I'm thinking, well, it's the time to interact and to have like communion with people. Thinking about the artistic end, you know, I've scribbled some vignettes looking at kind of the internal impact of this, like the repetition, the monotony, which we talked about before we came on. And it's, you know, it'll find its way into the work. The silly part is when I go out and walk in the morning and see people at the coffee shop, I'm really giddy because I know in some ways like that's my human contact for the day. But I think, more grateful for interactions. And as I said, a lot of people who know me know that like I cry. I was walking the other day and this woman was coming up the street with a stroller and her son, who's 1.5, she told me, because I asked. And he was kind of with it, he waved, and it just broke me because it was beautiful. And it's a reminder of that we're here for and with each other. And, you know, this is like my Goddard pedigree coming out though, but like the Ram Dass said, we're just walking each other home. And I think it's more important now. I think about my family. A lot of I won't go on any further, but a lot of my family of choice is in Vermont. So you all know who you are. I love you. I miss you. And so what does life come down to? And it's tied to poetry, the essentials. Like as a poet, you want to use the essential words, not the using words for the sake of them. And that's a tie-in which I've really have a deeper level of quote unquote understanding as a result of things right now. And but yeah, some days you just want to go home, you just want to see your friends. And I allow myself to cry. You know, I grew up in the Baptist church, and you get emotional, and the ushers would say, "Oh, just go ahead and cry, baby." So I just cry, you know. What the heck? I'm almost 64. Too late, you know. You can't moonwalk back through life. You just gotta keep going.
I love the
Okay,
fact
we're
that
done.
you were to cry. I think it's a skill, and I think it's a great demonstration of empathy. And for me, every time I am able to cry about something during this strange time, I find that it sort of clears out the pipes. You know, I'm able to sleep a
Mm-hmm.
little bit better. It's sort of like a natural narcotic. But I have been, like many writers, not very well able to write. I think partly because for novelists, maybe you're supposed to write once you have some perspective on the time
Mm-hmm.
you're living through, and everything is so immediate. But on the other hand, when you're talking about poetry, and I'm actually supposed to make you ask you, not make you, but ask you read your poetry, but I'm fascinated by this. My team is like, here she goes talking about writing. But I feel as though there's such an immediacy to the time that we're living through, that when you are able to connect with a child in a stroller, or get your cup of coffee, or you do, you know, risk hugging a friend with your faces turned away, it means so much more in a very profound, gratitude inspiring way than it maybe did before the pandemic. So not to sound all Pollyanna, but I feel as though those moments are actually physical representations of poetry, like those tiny thumbprints of emotion
Bingo.
they leave on your psyche and your
Right.
human creature, right?
I often say, poetry it's all around. It's not just the stuff on the page. And it is, not to turn this into a lecture, but it's a way of living, and those vignettes which can produce work happen all the time. And um, I think what we do share, whether it's poetry or fiction, it's getting the idea and letting it germinate and being patient with it. And I often tell students, well, if it doesn't work as a sonnet, try something else. Don't get too discouraged. I say, don't think about clothes in the closet. Like, if the blazer doesn't work, try something else. If the jeans don't, try khakis. And for me, revision and letting it germinate is possibility, which it wasn't always the case when I was, um, as a friend of mine likes to say, a younger version of myself. So,
Do you, and
good.
I would love to hear you read the poems that you have prepared, but I'm wondering, when you
Okay.
are seized by the idea for a poem,
Mhm.
I have written maybe 3 poems in my life, which everybody's grateful they never saw. But when I
Oh,
did
to that
write
much.
them,
Uh-huh.
it actually is true, but thank you. But they came through me like a sneeze almost. I mean, they were
Uh-huh.
that imperative. They could not be stopped. It was an emotion that came through me onto the page, and I tried to sculpt it in words. Do you, even though you're trying out the sort of different clothing on the idea, when you are seized by an idea these days, is it still that immediate and present, or is it something that you work over for a while?
Both. I mean, I think the inspiration can be like that, and you don't know when you walk out the door that something's gonna happen. But for me, again, letting things germinate is it's like possibility. You mentioned punk, and that phrase Patti Smith used, the sea of possibilities. So I like having something which may end up in another form. It might, come up down the line. Um, I think not letting those things, not trying to force them, I guess is what I'm saying. And that that is a gift. I think maybe that if there are any gifts to be gleaned from this time, is having, comparatively speaking, more time to do that. Um, and as I said, you never know when something's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, let's write about this. Or maybe you'll get an idea, and the poem or the idea or the stanza will say, oh, that's it for today. Go watch some reruns or go do some laundry. And I think you have to honor that process. The great writer Amiri Baraka said, writing is not just hunting, it's not just those heads on the wall. So it's the process and getting to where you're wanting to go. And sometimes, of course, as you know, your initial idea may be completely different by the time it hits the page or the screen, and then it's gone, and it might call you at Christmas, and then that's it. Like, yeah, how you doing? Okay, we're living in Bel Air now. Goodbye.
20 years later, I've gone through the time machine now. I can't talk to you. I can't, going into the time tunnel. Can't talk to you right now. Yes.
What's your name again? I forgot.
I don't remember that idea. Okay. Though I love the idea of honoring the process is so important. I think as a young writer, I was very frustrated by the idea that I couldn't produce everything instantly and immediately and have it be perfect. And as an older writer, I now am still annoyed when things don't come out perfectly the first time, because that happens so much. But I do honor the process of saying, well, you know what, I've worked as much as I can today and I'm forcing it. It feels like crap. I'm going to go watch the Kardashians or something. Go to TJ Maxx in the olden days before the pandemic, and then come back again the next day and again the next day. Reuben, would you read us some of your poetry so we can continue to be soothed, edified, and inspired, which I already am?
Like my law firm. Anyway, Soothe LLC. These poems are from Scattered Clouds, my most recent book. I was going to say wherever fine books of poetry are sold. I can't believe I said that, but I did. Okay. This piece, I was thinking about something a comedian, and I can never remember who said this, African-American comedian said, first I was a child and then I was Black. And this, I guess, addresses, among other things, it's like that awakening to this thing which exists, race and everything which comes along with it. It's called On the Road, which of course is a kind of a nod to the Jack Kerouac novel, and maybe the fork in the road as where an African American speaker's experience might take them, as opposed to Jack Kerouac and friends. So, On the Road, Columbia, South Carolina, spring 1959. I remember enormous teepees, neon Indians dancing and dancing around them. I did my best to convince Father that he was tired and that we should spend the night at the Frontier Motel. Fine Southern cooking, the sign said. Columbia, South Carolina's best. We could call Aunt Bertha, assure her we'd arrive in Augusta tomorrow. I would spend my savings on ribbons for Maureen's hair. It worked. So why did he return without room keys? I watched the village disappear from the back seat of his Ford. I'm going to jump forward here. A lot of the poems in this book look at my growing up, I kind of stole this idea from NPR as it shows this American life. It's just like this African American life, is seen through my nearsighted eyes here. My initial contact with Goddard came when I went to Goddard College, in 1975. And I came from DC, which at that time, 75% Black. I knew where I was going, but this kind of commemorates my first slow dance. I used to slow dance in the basement of my parents' house, but by myself, like Tom Cruise and Risky Business. But the music was different. And I came to Goddard and I could talk about stuff like the Bhagavad Gita, things I also loved, but you don't tell your boys, yeah, I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita tonight. Or you don't say, you're hanging out with your friends and you maybe, like, we used to drink wine and stuff in the alleys on Friday nights. Yeah, I was checking out the Lotus Sutra Thursday night, reading it. So I got to come to Goddard and I could be that person. And actually, I could ask someone to slow dance and they'd say yes, which was, that's a Dear Diary moment, So this poem is 1975. It was a long way to go for a party, 15 minutes from Canada, moon just above my right hand. It was winter. She was a school teacher who smelled of jasmine. Stevie Wonder sang Looking for Another Pure Love while Jeff Beck spun gorgeous fills and solos. We danced as well as our cumbersome boots would allow. You want to talk now? Should I do one more? You're the conductor. I'm the third cellist here. So.
Well, I am not, but thank you. I feel
Okay.
a bit as though I'm being charmed by a flute, because I would listen to you read poetry all night. And that's probably something I have never said about poetry before. So
Thank
please
you.
continue, as many as you would like to read.
Okay, sure. Talking again about these pandemic or lockdown reflections. This is kind of oh midlife ruminations, but you think how much one is like one's parents. And growing up I thought, well, I don't want to be like I love my mother, but I'm different. You think you're really different. But the older I become, the more you see those intersections. Like I'm like my mother in this way. I'm like both my parents, but I'm really like my mother, who's a language arts teacher and who wrote poetry, which I always kind of knew, but in her absence, that stuff really starts to stick. The snow starts to stick. So this poem, this kind of goes back to high school when my mother was worried because she didn't think I had dates or something. This is 1973, pardon me. So this was, my mother peers over my shoulder in search of answers. Please say you're dedicating that poem to a woman you don't seem to know any. Listening to Ella Fitzgerald does not count. So I think of someone, call her. She says the wind's blowing from the south-southeast at 15 miles an hour. Barometer is 30.7 inches and rising. Yeah, I whisper, wear that strapless French number. See you at 8. Now, this piece is dated because, there are references to things you call the weather on the landline. And of course, people say, what's a landline? And I've said this to college students, and they kind of give you that look like, oh, Professor Jackson, what was King Tut really like? You know, um, so, but it's part of the path, trying to, because I was the nerdy kid, and I think my mother was just worried that I had no social life, but you do what you do, and I think that's another case of something which happened a long time ago, and it came to fruition in terms of poetry years later. I mean, I was worried. This poem originally appeared in Fingering the Keys, and I was worried like my mother would be crazy, like, well, what, do you not love me or something? But she was. My mother wanted to be a print journalist, and she's born in 1924. She wanted to be a music reviewer, which I did for the Washington Post and some other periodicals. She never got to do it. As a black woman, she didn't get to do it. So in many ways, it's like my son, my late brother was a pediatrician, but I did something that she was not able to do, which I didn't really think about at the time. It's like, well, I got lucky and I want to do this because the music was calling me. But I honor those links now, and even stuff like this where she nudged me about uh like dating. And then I got a girlfriend and she says, no, that's not the right one. It's just you can't win. That's another poem probably. But anyway, do you want to talk? Can I read another one, or again, I'm following your lead? Oops, pardon me.
No, you're fine. Thank you. I'm
Okay.
listening enraptured, and I know now why your Vermont family has been listening all those years with like great joy and enrapturement. And in fact, one of your family here in the chat said he's just going to turn off the screen and just listen to you. I think people really miss you, Reuben. Like, we want you to,
Oh, that's sweet.
as a radio host, make you cry again. You have a lot of family watching, I think, tonight. You could have called that poem maybe Mom is Always Right. Was that the experience that you had with your mom? Was she always right, no matter whether or not you wanted her to be?
Oh boy, we don't have that much time. I think excuse me here. She uh we were friends as much as one could be friends. Now, okay, here's an example. Tomorrow will be marked the 50th anniversary of the passing of Jimi Hendrix, who was someone really, really uh, special to me. And my mother hated Hendrix because she thought he's taking my son from me, from like 5th grade onward, this was too much. So I think let me read a Hendrix related poem. And it's a backdrop of sorts to what you just asked me. Okay, is that all right? This piece is the poem's called 52 West 8th Street, which is the address of Electric Lady Studios in New York, uh, which was Hendrix's studio he got to use uh, briefly before dying in September of 1970. But one weekend, myself and 2 other friends were in New York, and I didn't drag them to the usual places one associates with touring New York, but I said, let's go to the Village. I want to show you where Jimi Hendrix worked. And I knew the apartment because music nerds are like that. But this kind of came out of a whirlwind weekend in New York. 52 West 8th Street. We take 6th Avenue to the Village, pause for hot dogs in Washington Square Park, rush past the weekend crowds on pilgrimage. Part of my tour of New York includes pausing at a pot-bellied building beside the 8th Street Playhouse, where Nancy snaps a photograph. Jimi Hendrix's studio, I mumble to passing tourists who don't remember seeing this on their list of downtown hotspots, and to Nancy, who notices pictures of Jimi and Mozart in an upstairs window, snapping them just as it begins to rain. By now, I am tripping. I see a man crossing McDougal who looks like Billy Cox, Jimmy's last bassist. I am weaving like a blue note laced with strychnine. The air smells of patchouli. It is late August 1970. Jimmy emerges from the studio talking with a woman about management and final mixes of his next album, which he'll supervise when he returns from England. I ask if he'll pause for a picture. His turquoise belt is beautiful in the sun. That I see it's like a love poem to an artist I loved and love a great deal. And that is part of what drew me to him. Uh, and of course, this is, I use terms like tripping, thinking about LSD in the 60s and all, but it had to do with just being enraptured with this idea. This obviously a fantasy because this was like the late 80s when this quote unquote happened, But that, again, as a writer, you can, like your grandmother's favorite chair could be in Beirut somewhere. It doesn't have to be in Woodstock or DC or wherever we happen to be. And but I think that poem just, yeah, sometimes you get fairly close to where you intend to be as a writer. And, that's always good. Of course, keeping in mind, I forget who said this, like no poem is ever finished, it's only abandoned. And, sometimes I just think that's when I go and watch, I don't know, Andy Griffith read or go walking with kids and stuff like that.
So Reuben, I am getting requests from
Did I read enough?
Yeah. Yes, please. So I'm getting requests from your many fans here that I wink out so that they can see only you. And instead of me asking any of my nosy questions, they just hear you, like you are the man. So I didn't want to alarm you or startle you, but I'm going to turn off my video and I will come back. I'm still here, but you won't see me. And so I will come back in about 10 minutes so that I can ask you questions that are coming in from the audience. Is that okay?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm here listening rapidly, and I will see you in about 10 minutes, and just do your thing. We adore you. We're so happy you're here.
Oh, gosh, thank you all again. All right, this piece is, it's a variation on a poem by Wallace Stevens, and it's called 13 Ways of Looking at a Pit Bull. Now, of course, this too is, it's from Scattered Clouds. It's like some guy, my younger son on the cover here. 13 Ways of Looking at a Pit Bull. 1. Among 20 sleeping row houses, the only restless thing was the voice of the pit bull. 2. I was of 3 headaches like a neighborhood in which there are as many pit bulls. 3. The pit bull paced in the dealer's yard. It was but a small part of my anxiety. 4. A man and his dog are one. A hustler, his stash, and a loyal pit bull are frightening. 5. I do not know which to prefer, the disdain of neighbors or the disdain of neighbors, the pit bull brooding or the policeman rolling his eyes. 6. Rain covered the picture window with a posse of teardrops. The ghost of battered pit bulls crossed it to and fro. The mood traced in the shadows followed me into sleep. 7. O long-time brothers of Brightwood, why do you secretly long for chocolate labs? Do you not see how the pit bull sits at the feet of the players around you? 8. I know quieter cities and black men with unconquered livers, but I know too that the pit bull is involved in what I wish I didn't know. 9. When the pit bull strode in the shadows, it turned the asphalt into a pungent river. 10. The sight of a pit bull charging down Madison Street would make even the most ardent dog lover surrender the sidewalk. 11. He traveled the city in a quiet subway. Once a fear pierced him in that he mistook a sister's ringtone for that of a pit bull. 12. The block is silent. The pit bull and his owner must be away. 13. It was evening all afternoon, and it was going to rain. The forlorn pit bull sat in his doghouse. These pieces are from the third section of the book called Sky Blues, and some of these appeared back in 2017 in 7 Days, which Vermont Friends know is its weekly newspaper. It documents a relationship between Amir Yassin, who's an elderly African American barber living in Detroit, and I'd say Amir represents like late life love, and he fell in love with Khadijah Rollins, who's a CEO well known in Detroit, and so I'm just going to read a few of their love letters to each other. Here's a brief introduction, and I'll just read a couple. Amir and Khadijah, a suite. I first met the late poet, barber, romantic curmudgeon Amir Yassin at a party my late brother threw in his adopted hometown of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. At the time, Amir was, in his words, an unrepentant widower. He was sure as there were crooked politicians on the planet that no one would ever want to be involved with, quote, Detroit's greatest barber expert on the music of trumpeter and Detroit native Donald Byrd. But then in the spring of 2017, my friend met Khadijah Rollins, a well-respected Detroit-based CEO and, like Amir, a big jazz fan. One coffee date led to another, and to quote Ira Gershwin, love walked in. And so did poetry. Amir was particularly fond of writing in the 575 haiku form. In part, he once told me because it gave him time to express himself between clients at Detroit's Hang Time Barbershop, where he cut hair for 40 years. As his relationship with Khadijah progressed, Amir's writing sometimes became what he called pseudo-journal entries. Many, like the ones excerpted here, began, Dearest Khadijah. Amir and Khadijah were not so secretly married in Barbados in the fall of 2017. Sadly, Brother Yashin died in his sleep in early 2018, a few months shy of his 80th birthday. I'm proud of the fact that I share the same birth date, October 1st, with my much missed friend. Khadijah thought it'd be nice if I would include a few of Amir's love-struck musings in this volume. I'm honored that she gave me permission to do so and to include one of her poems. So here are 3 from Amir, 3 haiku, which he told me he uh, wrote between clients on a Saturday morning. If you've been to a barbershop, you know people come in. So I'm still impressed with what the rappers used to call like his mad skills. 3 haiku. Who'll be the first to save syllables and utter the sweet obvious? 2. I would rather be conspiring to hold her hand before the moon dies. 3. When Khadijah smiles on a mild spring afternoon, my old heart blossoms. Here are a couple more of these. All begin Dearest Khadijah, so they're from Amir to Khadijah Rollins. Dearest Khadijah, to touch your face is to feel my fingers pray. Dearest Khadijah, and it's subtitled August 1st. I thanked the moon for the light on her pillow, then whispered her name. This is untitled. She is a buoy in the harbor at dusk. And this one, I'll just say, I think every writer, of course, wants to be read. What I learned from both the article in 7 days and the power of language, which I think we're constantly being reminded of. I was in Shaw's grocery store in Colchester, Vermont, not long after the article by Dan Bowles in 7 days appeared, and I'm at the deli counter, and I said, "Well, I'd like, like a half a pound of egg salad." And this woman, people know your voice. You're on the radio. It's your oral fingerprint, right? And she says, "Are you Reuben Jackson?" And Southern kid. I said, "Yes, ma'am." She says, "That poem you had in the paper about Khadijah, and she was out of town. I read it to my husband, and my husband's tough, but he burst into tears." And I thought, I mean, that's obviously very complimentary, but I thought, wow, that's pretty. It's a reminder of the power of language. And everybody at the deli counter is like, "Who's this guy?" But here's the poem, Dearest Khadijah. The other night, as I was driving home, I reached my free hand across the passenger seat. I imagined you holding it before the light changed. Then I returned both hands to the wheel. I found a parking space 2 blocks from my apartment beneath a large maple. Lord, I love this city, and turned to kiss you anyway. This concluding section, 2 pieces by Khadijah Rollins. And, she traveled and still does a lot, conferences, well, not this year, but that kind of thing. And uh, so this is Khadijah's Nocturne. We share the same night, even when we are distant, consoled by the stars. Um, okay, back to music a little bit here. Uh, I grew up in a house where music was prevalent. Like my mom played a little classical piano, and my father played the stereo. That's an old joke, But I heard everything from like Rachmaninoff to Muddy Waters, Lerner and Lowe musicals. It was like a green light in terms of this thing, which had grabbed me like pretty early on. And my father liked Frank Sinatra a lot. My father was like Calvin Coolidge, which, I mean, Vermonters know, Silent Cal. Like my father would give you 3 words every 6 months. But he loved Frank Sinatra, as did and as do I. I wrote this poem not long after Frank Sinatra died. There's something about his artistry, the way he would phrase behind the beat, which he got from Billie Holiday, and the way he would structure concerts. A lot of my attempts at assembling material for readings came from seeing Frank Sinatra twice, and he would get up and just these terse but beautiful introductions, like here's a piece by the great Harold Arlen, and you're just transfixed, and the phrasing, et cetera, et cetera. So this is for my man, uh, Frank Sinatra, for Frank Sinatra. Like God or Miles, no second name is needed, as opposed to Frank, party of 17. May I have a last name for the maitre d'? You understand? The heart needs no such pretense when in the wee small hours plays. 32 bar ashrams, peace from a boy from Hoboken. If he was an ass kicker, so be it. I think of the brilliant brown voices of my youth They too deserved protection in nights when their angels required rest. I dared not purchase his music where my face is familiar, for my love for his sound is as personal as stretch marks or rings inside a tree trunk old enough to remember all the things you are, for Frank Sinatra. There's an article in the Washington Post recently about the impact of COVID on night spots, and including jazz clubs here. And once I was old enough to go to clubs here, myself and my late brother Al would go to hear, local musicians, internationally known, and you just much of my life has been spent chasing music. This is an elegy for a club which closed a few years ago here in DC called the One Step Down. It was so intimate, like you have a seat. Sometimes the waiter or waitress would walk back and forth in front of what passed for the bandstand, and the tray might hit the cymbal, or somebody's butt might hit the cymbal. It was that close, but it's that intimacy, which brings you even closer to the sound, what people call the sound of surprise, jazz. This is elegy for the One Step Down. Where did the jukebox go? Its scratchy discs older than time. Each song a seance bringing Count Basie and Billie Holiday back to the clarinet narrow room where I blew shy variations into the holes of onion rings. Did you hear them over the din of yawing cymbals? Ice cubes rattling like the nerves of gamblers who bet on this club's immortality? Memory is a kind of jukebox in which you took to me like Ben Webster took to ballads, and I was as dapper as the evening sky. I want to do a couple more, or at least one more poem inspired by Jimi Hendrix. It's taken from, this is an anthology called Kiss the Sky. It's a fiction and poetry starring Jimi Hendrix. And if you know the story, he died when he was 27. So this too, like 52 West A Street it's a fantasia. It's Hendrix at 49. Now, just a bit about the backstory. I'd read a piece in, I think, Esquire magazine about uh, Morgan Freeman. And I don't know if you ever saw this movie, Lean on Me, but there's like he's playing a school teacher, and this young shot of Morgan Freeman's got this big afro and the dashiki, and I thought, my God, he looked like Jimi Hendrix. And he was in Morgan Freeman was in a version of Othello, and someone yelled from the balcony, play Purple Haze, because he resembled to some people Hendrix. So that plays into this poem, but it's kind of wondering, what would have been if you know, if Hendrix had made it past 27, because he was someone who was interested in so much more beyond that which he was, it's like, okay, counterculture figure, all that, but he loved Schoenberg and Andy Williams and Bach and all these people. So it's like that's something else which drew me to him. It's like the black man who's gentle and wry and sensitive, visceral, all that. But so that's what's that old Otis Redding song? That's how strong my love is. That's what drew me to him. It's brave to be. So let me do this. Hendrix at 49. Some misinformed folks spot me and call out Morgan Freeman, just as someone interrupted his stint as Othello to request Purple Haze. I still get letters from fans wanting to know which brand of lighter fluid I used on that guitar back in 1967. As if my records with Ladysmith Black Mambazo and Miles Davis never happened. Meanwhile, Mick Jagger dyes his hair trying to reassure aging fans. But the day my stomach was pumped of all that purple bile was the day I took my money and built trees around what was left of my spirit. No endless string of farewell tours for me. You can't even find Grecian Formula 16 in my general store. So Hendrix at 49. I'll unplug my guitar there, and if you want to, we can trade fours a bit more if you have questions, that sort of thing. It's a good hair day for me. I hope you all see this.
So Reuben, people just want you to keep reading, honestly. Like they want me to
Really?
go by and like really, like we would just like to hear you read as long as you feel like reading. Honestly, I'm gonna wink out again and I'm just gonna sit here and sip on my gin and tonic and listen to you. It's okay with you.
Do people have questions? I mean, or they just want me to read? I'm the kid from the back of the classroom. Okay, all right.
I mean, I think they just want you to read. So bye. Like I'll be back in another
Okay.
10 minutes. So
Okay.
that's okay with you.
Pass me the Bar Hill while you're. Okay. I
Okay,
will do.
one question we do have is people wanted to
Yes.
hear about your memoir. So whether you want to talk about that now or,
I can do it now.
Okay.
It's in the nascent stages, but I'm hoping. Well, here's what it's. I've been looking back at my time in Vermont, both as a high school teacher, just the whole experience, and my um, immersion into a culture which is very different, the challenges of it, what it also meant to a kid who, dealt with some trauma growing up, and what doing things like I volunteered at a goat farm, a couple of times, that kind of thing. So it's I'm just looking back at that period, what it means to be like a kid of the civil rights movement and who lived in a city where Black archetypes were plentiful, suddenly finding himself in a place where, especially I think for Black American men, where the archetypes are limited and the challenges, uppercase challenges inherent with that. So I am scratching on it now. It's and hopefully if we get through this madness, and there are many ways to describe the madness we're dealing with now, that will knock on Formica. I'll say knock on Maple because autumn is coming to Vermont. That will be my next book. But I'm also working on some poems in the voice of this guy Kelly Donaldson. But anyway, that's kind of a capsule summation of the book, and we'll see what happens. But I'm not a lot of things, but I'm really not one of those people who talk about some idea and not, if it isn't seriously on the highway, to fruition. So stay tuned. And as Marvin Gaye said during his last tour, he said, "Stick with us. We're gonna try and give you more." So that's there. I hope that answered the question. Other question? Oh, there's a question about my favorite poets.
Yes.
Sure.
I can let you take them from the chat if you like, so I don't have to keep winking on and off. And
Okay. It's good.
Yes, your favorite poems who you love to read, and also the musicality of your language. Do you think about music while you're writing?
Oh God. Well, yeah. I'll answer the second question first. Gotta sound like a DC politician. One of my teachers, again, like Amiri Baraka, said that he said poetry is speech music, and he made up, musicked. So the musicality is it's crucial for me. The first poets, and some of my friends have heard me say this a zillion times, the first poets I heard were like ministers and the old AM days. The music would just roll off their tongues, as was the case with ministers. There were brothers in my neighborhood who could take profanity within the course of a sentence, and really it sounded like soliloquies and etudes and stuff. And when I was a kid, I would try to get them to use a certain uh, a certain expletive, which coincidentally or not is Kamala Harris's favorite expletive is the same word. It's MF, but it's not mezzo forte. You know where I'm going here. But so all that, you hear it and you think, my God, this is like the best thing. So like the old movie, the sound of music is always in my head. And I'm also always thinking about music in the literal sense. So like a friend loaned me a Fender Rhodes electric piano the other day, and I'm just playing with, it's like, okay, how many different ways can you play or voice like an F minor seventh chord? So it's rhythm, assonance, rhyme, all those things are key. But I do believe you should honor and exploit in the best way the sound of language. You hear it every day, compliments, insults. Um, when I teach creative writing, I'll often refer students to sermons even on like YouTube, and I'm not proselytizing. It's to hear what can be done and to think about the great orators. Yes, people who are considered poets. And I think my love for poets is similar to my love for music. Like I do love Keats and Shelley. I also love Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez and Major Jackson. I always tease and say, you're like the younger, more successful Jackson. Teaches at UVM, lived in Vermont for many years. But again, like the poets I heard in little cafes when they'd say, the way people can say baby, things I heard, like, God, that's just like a symbol, like that. So I'm engrossed with the sound of music. And if I don't have that, I know I need to like maybe turn the griddle up a little higher or flip the pancake over once again. But yeah, it's got to have that music. It's got to have that music for me. And I think communicating with people. Today's the birthday of one of my favorite writers, William Carlos Williams, who probably best known for the Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Again, this is kind of like a Mary Baraka night, but I have other teachers who influenced me profoundly. But he introduced me to William Carlos Williams, and he like, pronounced the name rapidly, so I thought it was one name. He said, "You need to read William Carlos Williams," and I thought, this must be a brother. He had that way it sounded. But, he was a doctor in New Jersey, but he said you need to think about writing the way people talk, because I was pretty good with the forsooth and all that, but he's like, nah. So I'm talking about influence too, but how that works its way into what you try and do. I'm probably like a 55th rate William Carlos Williams influenced writer, but you take your song, you take your story, and try to honor your influences not by literal imitation, but by as a saxophonist Lester Young would say, singing your own song. I'm having fun that I see like Vermont people get all this stuff out of me. I'm like talking. So it's like, anyway. Any other questions? Oh, have I thought of
questions? Yep.
Go ahead.
Being invisible. I'm sort of tiptoeing out of the whole event and turning it over to you, except to feed questions. So
sure.
yeah, we'll add.
I just saw the next one about doing an audio book of.
Yes.
It's. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's not something I would be against. I'm radio, like the radio thing. I started at Goddard when I was 18. It kind of happened. I didn't know it was going to happen, and a lot of times people will say, I have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. Like that wasn't the case. I had a friend at a show my first year at Goddard, and it was Allen Ginsberg's birthday, and she said, could you read some of these poems for like the second hour, and I'll just put some music underneath you. So, Hearts of Howl and things from the book The Fall of America, blah, 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 blah. And then she says, well, do the third hour, I'll run the board under you. So influence, again, like with poetry, I tried to imitate the FM DJs I'd heard up until that point. At Howard University, which is here, had a jazz station at the time, WHUR, and it's these cool voice people. It's 1:45, and we just heard the Ron Carter Quartet was playing Ron Carter's Little Waltz. So you try to do that, and I loved sharing music. So I eventually got a show, studied, and got my FCC license, blah blah blah. But see, it's the radio stuff and the poetry stuff are not so far apart. You're organizing a show, you organize a reading or a manuscript. I told my former principal, Burlington High School, I said, well, a unit of study is like a radio show, or and she bless her, she's kind of literal minded, but I see, I have embraced the relationships between all those things, and it's taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot, and but see, again, even reading poems, I'm conscious of the sound, the way I was conscious of the sound between you know what something is saying, and that you are delivering it. You're delivering a story, but you also want to, the music, as we say, a little colloquially, you got to sing. It ain't, for me, if I just sat here and was very stoic, that's no good, because even if I'm like on long drives, I'll recite poems by Dylan Thomas, the great Welsh poet. So that's, I just love it. I feel grateful that I was tapped on the shoulder. Um, Someone asked a question about environment. I'm sorry, I missed the whole thing because I was running my mouth. But do my poems change from depending on location? Uh, I guess they do. Sometimes you're the last to know, because I do think environment plays a role in how um, which you produce, how it quote sounds. But you don't know. For me, it's maybe more thematic. But like I said, sometimes you look up a couple of years, 5 years later, and you go, "Wow, that sounds like something which is redolent of maybe, I don't know, a geographical location." I'll say this, and it's kind of a first cousin to the question. I was talking to a friend about living in Vermont, and I said, "See, growing up here, yeah, I had daydreamed. I love music and all that stuff. You could get your butt kicked coming home from school. You're like on the honor roll, and people get mad at you. And the teacher say, 'Oh, Reuben, was asked to do something with the National Symphony Orchestra,' and people look at you like, 'We're gonna get you at 3 o'clock.'" So you have that kind of stuff to deal with. I did. And so you learn to walk a certain way, where like brothers walk down, sort of, people call it bopping. Well, when I was in Vermont, for all the stuff which can and did happen, I was I kind of bounced when I walked like a geek, because I am a geek, and I thought, wow, that's a product of environment, because there are challenges, but it wasn't the same thing as the stuff I dealt with. Like I had 3 or 4 ways to get home from school because somebody want to like take your money or something. But yeah. So anyway, but those things will work their way into something you're trying to do. And sometimes they'll tell you, like, well, this is about walking down 7th Street after school, and when so and so wanted to take your money that day in December, but it may tell you later. So I'm really trying to keep digging into the path, and but also, again, to quote the saxophonist Lester Young, to not be a repeater pencil. Though it's tricky, because then, to quote the writer Somerset Maugham, who said, well, you probably have one story and you rewrite it over and over again. So, okay. looking to see. I saw another question just then about jazz musicians, and I missed it.
What
I'm all,
musician
yeah.
would you recommend a new reader listen to after reading your work for the first time? And
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
absolutely, Reuben, absolutely. So what jazz musicians would you recommend a new reader listen to after reading your work? And we would love to hear a couple more of your own poems if you don't mind.
No pressure. What to listen to? One of my problems is that, and a listener said this to me once on after a show when it's on VPR. He emailed and said, "You're musically confused." You know, I had trouble honing in on a particular period, stylistically, chronologically. Um, so let's see. My gosh, I mean, there are. If you think about the equivalent of the canon in literature, of course, there are the great, like Mary Lou Williams and Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, Count Basie, people like that. I'm also very fond of, that relationship between what's called the American popular song and improvisers. So, like, I'm a big Rodgers and Hart fan. Rodgers and Hammerstein, yeah, okay, but Rodgers and Hart, that's deep in my H-A-R-T, deep in my H-E-A-R-T. Oh, now Kamasi Washington. Oh my gosh, Esperanza Spalding, Terrace Martin. I'm so happy to see young musicians who are aware of the tradition, but they also, to quote Ezra Pound, make it new. Um, Now, someone just also asked about my love for, did I have any feelings about Robert Hayden and Michael S. Harper, who was a friend of mine. Robert Hayden, Michael Harper called Robert Hayden the poet of perfect pitch. And uh, Hayden caught a lot of grief because he didn't, he wore his hair straight in the 60s and he said he loved Yeats and stuff. But oh my gosh, I love him so much. Morning Poem for the Queen of Sunday. Oh, there's a poem called Double Feature. I spent a lot of time in the movies as a kid, and it's uh, like at Dunbar Castle or Arcade, where we were other for an hour or two. My gosh. So that Michael Harper, of course, Dear John, Dear Coltrane, he was very helpful to me as a younger writer, and he'd kick your butt like the old Green Bay Packers coach Vince Lombardi. He always wanted you to know more, to not settle because you had a poem in the Indiana Review. But I think they're both. Um, what did Lester Young say again? They're like sparks of my heart. As writers, I met Robert Hayden once before he died, 1980, and it meant the world to me. It's that whole thing people get tired of hearing, but seeing people who look like you and to have been included in an anthology edited by by Michael Harper, and you think, wow, it's like the Black people I saw and heard about growing up, and you think you'll never, that's a distant planet. But I've been, like Duke Ellington said, I've been lucky. Now, what am I reading now? A lot of I read a lot of biographies, and I just reread the biography of Arturo Toscanini, the great conductor. There's a new Nat King Cole biography called Straighten Up and Fly Right. Uh, Another really good Jimi Hendrix biography. Poetically speaking, I'm really fond of, oh gosh, so many young writers, but hmm, younger writers like Ross Gay is incredible. I think Danez Smith, there's a poem by Danez Smith called Principles, which you can look up on YouTube. It's literally a poem I've been waiting my whole life for. And I heard him read it at a festival 4 years ago. And like the first line is, ask not what your country can do for you, ask if your country really is your country. So there are all these youngins. It's like, Brave New World, the Finger Snap Kids. I it's like, who's this old dude in the Kennedy Center Opera House? I'm losing my stuff. It's like, yes, yes, I'm testifying back in the Baptist church. So that's that's it right now. I take a lot of walks and stuff, mostly to try to maintain. And then I'll read another uh, poem after this. Someone asked about Stanley Crouch, the jazz critic who died yesterday. I think he was a very gifted writer. Uh, I think a lot about his essays for the Village Voice, which is where I was introduced to him. I think I posted on my Facebook page that, to quote Tupac, we had beef a lot because he said things about hip hop, which I thought were just kind of heavy-handed, and he hated Electric Miles Davis and that kind of stuff. But and he could be pugnacious, but I think he's a great writer. I'm still sifting through that. I wish he wrote an essay about the great saxophonist Ben Webster called Brute's Progress, and his nickname was the Brute, Ben Webster, and I think his contribution to letters, particularly as it relates to music, is it's what did Duke Ellington say? It's worthy of the plateau. But I won't discount the. We really did have some squabbles, which he had with a lot of people. Here are a couple more pieces I'll share. Let's see. This is for my father, who worried about me because I knew early on, yeah, we love music, but like I still like ballet and opera a lot. And my father was kind of like character in an August Wilson play. It's like you want your son to be tougher because the butt kicking is not an if, it's a when. So he was more brass tacks kind of guy. Oh, I did this poem, and you'll hear the connection between. Imagine yourself a bookish boy at the time, and your father saying, "I'm sending you to military school so you can be tougher." So some years later, I learned to, you know, change my own antifreeze, and this poem came out of this. Changing antifreeze. I know it is only a simple counterclockwise turn of the drain valve. But for this moment at least, I am not a librarian at the mercy of mechanics. I am my father. I am every calloused fingered master of automotive technology who ever donned a shirt with red stitched lettering above the pocket. Call me Joe. When a neighbor passes, I nod, affect the pose of a man for whom this rudimentary task is but the beginning. There is a space shuttle in Florida just begging for my touch. My dad, when I got my FCC license, so I could, be in this radio studio at Goddard by myself, my father was very proud of me because it was something he could relate to. He was an electrical engineer, and it wasn't the same as like your kid, having two poems in whatever it is, Plowshares or some literary journal. Toward the end of his life, I'll just say this and I'll read a poem. When my first book, Fingering the Keys, received a Columbia Book Award, and Joseph Brodsky's on stage, and my parents are in the front row at the Folger Shakespeare Library. My father's father, my grandfather, was a sharecropper. And, here's your son in this world. Like, you want better for your kids, but what if that better is different than something you imagined? And I can see they're both beaming. My father's like a cocktail. He's beaming, and he's also like, who the hell is this dude? But that night he told me, he's like, and it's like guys talking to each other, man, I'm really proud of you. Well, I mean, that just broke me because I thought you never get over that thing of trying to, like your kid, and you take the your finger paintings home from school for a second grade. Look at what I painted, the Danube River or something. So anyway, that's part of my story here. Let's see. This piece is thinking about, again, I mentioned, growing up looking for myself. It's in 3 parts. It's called How to Be a Black Man. 1. I peeped the lyrical lope of criminally handsome men, sunlight on their do-rags, Newport smoke, walking arm in arm with flawless cool. I was Kilimanjaro high whenever they spoke. 2. Late at night when I was certain that even God was sleeping, I would try and be butcher Black Jesus, though I was sure the style police would arrest me. They didn't, but I could hear the wind laugh. 3. Hendrix on the Dick Cavett Show, August 1969. I'd seen comedians and singers, but never this soft, droll brilliance, never such shy confidence. You could smell the incense all the way to Mars. All right, so that's kind of close to where my quarter ends with the parking meter. I don't know if there are other questions or how you'd like to proceed. I cannot tell you what an honor this is, though, and to, share some stuff with you.
Reuben, we are so, so happy to have had you here this evening. I can't tell you how happy you've made your audience. If there was one question that we didn't get to, it was from a gentleman who wanted to know how it feels to inspire so many people.
Wow. Sorry. I'm thankful if that's the case. I'm thankful. I think the wealth in my life is through, I guess, teaching. Like I said, my mother was a teacher, and I recently said, "Oh, teaching's like the family business in terms of like my mother's side of the family. We're all educators." Uh, I think sharing what we know and love and care about, whatever it happens to be, is, I don't know. For me, it's like it's that time of life. You can um, amass things and like that, but I'm thankful. I do my best. I have been uh, buttressed by people, growing up who let me know that it was okay to be myself and to write or to, that it was okay to love both, like this metaphor, muddy waters and like Rachmaninoff. So if that is the case, I thank you for saying that. It My heart is really full. Um, the thing I'll say too about Vermont is that in many respects, so much of my walk in life was also strengthened by Vermont. And as I said to someone earlier, well, like my family of choice is there. I said this to you all. So it's not it's well, it just is. And for people to remember and think as they do about my show and all that, you're always here. I was last year when you could travel, I was in the Northeast Kingdom and gave a reading in Burlington. And I'm sitting there. I walked in, everybody's got white hair because, older demographically. And I said, "Oh, my people, you're my people also." Because, you could tell jokes about TV shows from the 60s and people would laugh and get it. We had a Q&A, and this woman raised her hand and said, "I want you to know I'm really sorry about the racism you encountered, but you'll always be one of us." And I just like buckled because I think everyone is seeking whatever home is, if it's like St. Augustine, the house in the heart. So thank you, again, back to what this this question, this statement, and you should, just know that, and um, yeah.
Nothing could be better than what you just said, Reuben. So thank you. We will let you go to enjoy your evening. Thank you
Go
for
cry on my pillows. Yeah, okay. No, thank you, and great questions.
By the way, we had a comment come in, a reader thanking Bookstock for introducing her to you, a beautiful human being whom she should have known before, but she's happy to know you now. And we're also happy to have spent time with you this evening. It has been a sheer pleasure and a joy and a delight. I want to thank Bookstock as well for getting us all together, and also the Yankee Bookshop, which is the oldest bookshop in Vermont, started in 1935, carries Reuben's books, including Scattered Clouds. So if you loved what you heard here this evening, please buy Reuben's books from the Yankee Bookshop. We'll put the link in all of the chat. And Reuben, again, thank you for gracing us and Bookstock with your presence, and thank you, Bookstock, for making this beautiful, beautiful night happen.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Everybody take care. We hope to see you soonish. Hope to see you soonish.